"Teacher, which is the most important command in the law of Moses?" Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is equally important." Anybody know what it is? Love your neighbor. Anybody ever heard this before? Raise your hand if you heard this one before. Okay. All right. Most people should, because I preached a whole sermon on it a couple weeks ago. The Good Samaritan, you remember that one? Anybody remember that one? Good Samaritan. The guy, he's on the road, he gets robbed, and he's half dead, and all these people passing by, all the religious people passing by, and this guy who was a cousin, almost like an enemy, picked him up and saved him. Remember that? Yes, Pastor. Everybody raise your hand, make me feel good. Yes, Pastor. That was a good one. That was a good one. Now, the whole point of the message, thank you, Mary, for clapping. A little extra in there. Mary's my friend, can you tell? The whole point of the message was that your neighbor is not necessarily the people who live next door to you, which is pretty cool if your actual neighbors are weird or really annoying. For instance, if you live next to a family of 9 and they were always leaving their bikes in their yard, your yard, and they're really loud, and they had little boys that were running around in the backyard naked. I know people like that. Someone better call the cops on those people. All right, those kind of people may not be the best kind of neighbors. So in this case, it's a relief that you have 1,400 Facebook friends that you can be neighborly with. But that's not really what the passage means. It means that essentially everyone is your neighbor. Everybody's your neighbor. Any person you come into contact with, and even the people that you have never met, are potentially your neighbors. But the passage also says a lot more than that. First of all, it says that our main priority is to love God with all of our being. Like every inch of our being is supposed to love God, intellectually, mentally, spiritually. And second, to love our neighbor. And that sounds easy enough, but really it's not easy at all. Loving people is, I think, unnatural. To be quite honest with you, loving them well is unnatural. Human beings are inherently selfish. A few weeks ago, I made this post about my little boy and how we should all love people like children love people and love God like children love God, and that's all good and it's true and children are sweet. But wait till you take that boy's iPad from him. "I don't like you, Daddy," like he does it. "I don't like you," like does this thing where he like want. Yeah, that's a child. Kids are egocentric. We are all sort of egocentric. We really value our own stuff. We like our own space. We demand rights. So loving our neighbors well is really, 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 really difficult. But according to Jesus, next to loving God, loving your neighbor is the most important thing that we can do. But really, you really can't do one without the other. Loving our neighbor requires loving God, and loving God well requires loving our neighbor well. Love God, love neighbor. You see how they sort of work together? You can't do one without the other. You can't be a student of the Bible. You can't be a student of the Bible and its theology and its doctrine if you don't love your neighbor well. And you can't say you love God just because you're really friendly and compassionate or kind to your neighbor. Love God, love your neighbor. They work hand in hand. And that's what's known as the greatest commandment, right? You know that. You know that. But it doesn't really come from Jesus. It originates from this set of 10 regulations written about 1,600 years before Jesus. You've all heard about the 10 Commandments, right? Anybody seen that movie with Charlton Heston? It's like 13 hours long. All the older people are like, yeah. That's me. I saw that movie. The 10 Commandments. Anybody know any of the 10 Commandments? Just go ahead. Anybody know? Just let me know. Honor their father and mother, right? Anybody else? Anybody else? Don't kill. Don't say the Lord's name in vain. Don't tell your husband to suck his gut in before he goes up to preach. You know them. Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness. Don't want your neighbor's stuff. These are known as, the 10 Commandments are known as apodictic laws. They're straightforward. They tell you very directly what you should do. If you take all these regulations together, you can break them down into 2 categories. Category 1 is love God, And category 2 is love your neighbor, just like Jesus said. So the question I have is, if you can break them down into 2 categories, why do we have to have 10? Why 10? Why can't we just keep it at 2? Because I'm going to be a lot better at doing 2 things than doing 10 things, right? Anybody agree? Anybody with me on that one? Yes. So why not just 2? Anybody here ever ask your kids to do some chores? You just say, hey kids, straighten up. Get this house clean. And you left the room. How'd that go? It didn't go so well. Because you got to be specific. Otherwise they say, I did clean. I put the clean clothes in the garbage can. I put the dirty laundry in the fridge. I did clean. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about. So you got to make a list. A real specific list. Gabby, do the dishes. Elijah, get your room done and vacuum the basement. Zechariah, pull that slice of pizza off the couch. Josiah, clear off the dining room table. Micah and Isaiah, you don't have to do anything, but please just don't pee on the bathroom floor. Now, I'm not joking about this. Last night, the kids were cleaning, and I know it was Isaiah or Zechariah because they don't close the bathroom door, and you heard it. You heard them going, and I yelled, don't pee on the floor. This is a true thing. True thing. So you got to make a list. So God made a list. 10 rules. But sometimes you make a list, and then you still have some questions. Has anybody ever met my son Josiah? All right. Dad, what if when I'm vacuuming, the vacuum cleaner catches on fire? Dad, what if when Gabby's doing the dishes, there's a malfunction in the sink? Dad, I told the boys that you only told them they couldn't pee on the bathroom floor, so I told them it was okay to pee in the driveway. This is real stuff. So sometimes you got to make your list a bit more specific. A list that includes real-life scenarios. This is called casuistic law. Now, I'm not going to do this with my kids, but that's what God did to his people, so they'd be really clear on how to love one another. And this is really good news for us, because there's a set of principles for us to follow if we want to be really good neighbors, which, aside from loving God, is the most important thing that a human being can do. So this morning we're going to look in the book of Leviticus, in the Old Testament, Leviticus 19. The scripture should be above my head, and if you have the Bible app, you can search events, and you can follow along, take notes, take part in a reading plan, and all that good, super happy, fun technology stuff. Starting in verse 9. When you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your field. Do not pick up what the harvesters drop. It is the same with your grape crop. Do not strip every last bunch of grapes from the vines. Do not pick up the grapes that fall to the ground. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigners that live among you. I am the Lord your God. I love this passage, and I love Leviticus because it's really obscure. What in the world does this have to do with me? What does harvesting grain and grapes have to do with me and loving my neighbor? I don't get it. Well, really, it has a ton to do with generosity and caring for the needs of other people. It says, when you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your fields. Do not pick up what the harvesters drop. So when you're collecting fruit and grain and vegetables from your farm, don't collect from the corners of your field. And this could be several acres. Don't touch it. Leave that for the poor. In fact, we want the poor to have a sense of dignity and enjoy the benefit of work. So we want them to harvest those crops. But not everyone can harvest. Some people are too sick, or they're too young, or they're too old. They can't harvest. So the crops that you are harvesting, leave some grain behind. Don't take all the grain. Leave some grapes behind. Leave some vegetables behind. And if you drop some on the ground, they're going to be waiting over there, so just leave them and let them come pick them up. Let the poor have this for nourishment. Now, if you aren't a farmer, you maybe not. Anybody here not a farmer? Not a farmer. Not a farmer. If you're not a farmer, you may not understand this. So let's sort of contemporize this. Let's say you go to the grocery store and you buy, how much does groceries cost for a family? Like $300, $400, $500, I don't know, a lot. You buy a bunch of groceries. But all those groceries aren't for you. So you're going to take some of those groceries, a good portion of the groceries you've purchased, and you're going to leave those groceries in a box on your front porch so the poor can come pick up that food and then cook it for themselves. But not everyone can cook. Some people are too young or too old or too sick to cook. So in addition to leaving some groceries out, you're going to make some food for them and leave that out as well. Now imagine if everyone in our community did that. Would there be any hungry people? I live in a development with 500 people. Some of those people are wealthy. What if everyone gave a portion of their income to buy food and leave that out? Would there be any hungry people? No. No hungry people. So if everyone took that responsibility, they'd understand that it was their responsibility to help people in need. And that part of being a neighbor and part of loving people was providing for neighbors that didn't have anything. Now notice how verse 10 ends. What are the final 6 words? I am the Lord your God. I'm the Lord your God. Why is he saying this? You've made your cleaning list. You told the kids what they got to clean up, and they just don't understand it. They don't like it. Have you ever given a child the cleaning list? Like, if you told a child to do something, and you've seen their reaction? Like, I got one child who, like, kind of goes and convulses. Like, I don't want to do it. Like, what? There's, like, shaking going on, and, like, crying, and, like, one falls to the ground and, like, sort of shakes. Really bizarre. They say, why? I don't want to do that. And maybe you don't have a kid, but you remember when you were a kid, and you remember doing that same thing. Why do I got to do it? And sometimes your parents just say 4 words. I'll stop feeding you. Or you might say, because I said so. Because I said so. As a parent, sometimes you have to appeal to your authority. Sometimes you have to say, look, you may not get it, but you have to trust me as your parent that I know what's best for our family. And if you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. Or if you've ever been a kid, which is everybody, you know what I'm talking about. And that's what God is saying here. Make sure the basic needs of the people in our community are taken care of. Why? Because I'm God. I ain't playing, and I mean it. Do it. Moving on to verse 11. Do not steal. Do not deceive or cheat one another. Do not bring shame on the name of the Lord your God by using it to swear falsely. I am the Lord. This is basic stuff. We all know this. This is the stuff your parents have been telling you since you were a child. I remember when I was a kid, I stole some candy from the store, and my dad said, give me a piece of that. Nah, my dad told me to take it back, right? My dad told me to take it back. Why? Because you can't be stealing things. To love your neighbor, you have to trust your neighbor. If you're taking things that don't belong to you, or you are lying, or you're cheating, you won't have trust. And without trust, we can't have meaningful relationships. Then God takes it a step further. God says, do not bring shame on the name of the Lord your God by using it to swear falsely. In other words, don't promise something in accordance to your belief in me. When I was growing up, we all kind of believed in God, like me and my buddies. But we were bad kids. We're bad news. But we believed in God a little bit. And when we wanted to convince somebody that we were telling the truth, we'd be like, bro, I swear to God. Half the time we were lying. But we knew if we said that, people would believe us. God says, don't do that. Don't use my name to manipulate or compel people to believe you. Because compelling people to believe you, they'll do it because they believe in me, and then they'll trust you when you're lying. So don't deceive. Don't cheat. Don't manipulate people. I am the Lord your God, and I'm not playing around. He continues in verse 13. Do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Do not make your hired workers wait until the next day to receive their pay. This is similar to the previous set of verses, but this verse deals with money or possessions. Don't take your neighbor's stuff. Don't take his car, his wife, his weed eater. If you borrow it, return it. And for goodness sakes, if someone does work for you, pay him or her on time. And I'm going to tell you something. The sense of conviction right now is intense. The Lord's speaking to me because I still have the Rupel's guacamole bowl and they're in Mexico. I still have Dorothy Kirk's book and her coffee cup lid and Bill Swan's pop-up tent. And Pearl, for taking my daughter to Chardon the other night. Pearl, come on up here and get your pay, young lady. I threw some interest in there for you. Thank the Lord for his mercy and kindness which endureth forever. Gets a bit more serious in verse 14. Do not insult the deaf or cause the blind to stumble. You must fear your God. I am the Lord. What God is talking about here is the disadvantaged. Do no harm to them. Don't cause grief or make their life more difficult. This is an extension of what we learned in verse 9. Provide and make accommodations for people who are disadvantaged or disabled. But more than that, don't speak poorly of them. It's one thing to be charitable. It's another thing to have mercy and compassion for people. Now, we can all give a couple of cans to the food bank. I'm sure everyone's sort of done some of that stuff. But you can't do that and say derogatory things about people who are disadvantaged or disabled. If you do that, you've still got it wrong. It's not just about what you do, it's about what's in here. We see this expanded in verse 33, which is not up here. Do not take advantage of foreigners who live among you in your land. Who's a foreigner? The foreigner is anyone who is other. Any person who is a minority in your community, a minority of any type. Do not oppress this person or these people. What is oppression? Well, you can just ask somebody and take their word for it. You don't have the right to tell someone if their oppression is real or not if you don't live inside their skin. You don't have the right to tell someone if their oppression is real or not if you don't live inside their skin. Did you hear me, church? Treat them like native-born Israelites and love them as you love yourself. Remember that you were once foreigners living in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. I mean it. Wrap your mind around that. Any person among you who is the smallest minority, who is other, should be included among you as a person in your community. Treated like you want to be treated. Respected like you want to be respected. Loved like you want to be loved. Now listen, this doesn't mean that you can't have disagreements or differences of opinion, but it does mean in your attitude, and pay attention to all of this, being different is not a limitation in our love for others. Race is not a limitation in our love for others. Gender is not a limitation in our love for others. Sexual orientation is not a limit in our love for others. Political affiliation is not a limitation in our love for others. Songs or flags or nationalism is not a limitation in our love for others. In fact, there is no acceptable limitation or restrictions or barriers that God will permit in our love for other people. You see someone, you love them. We may not understand that. You may not like that. But God has declared that, so we will do that. Why? Because I am the Lord your God. You don't have to get it. You don't have to understand it or relate to it. But if you want to love God well, you have to obey it. But love requires balanced justice. So it says in verse 15, don't twist justice in legal matters by favoring the poor or being partial to the rich and the powerful. Always judge people fairly. Don't be partial. Don't have so much compassion that you lose wisdom or discernment. Don't favor people, on the other hand, who have power or money. Think about who has the power and influence in our society. People with money, the wealthy. If you have money, you can do anything. Anything. You can rise to the highest levels of power. God is telling us not to show partiality in matters of justice based on social status, but also understand that justice is really, really, really important. Compassion doesn't mean that we don't value justice. If my child is being teased and he punches that kid in the face, I'll feel compassion for my son, but he's also going to go over there and apologize to that kid. Because compassion is necessary, but so is justice. Because it preserves equality. It ensures that we are all treated with fairness. Now, there's a little bit of a shift here. It becomes more personal and difficult. Maybe you don't have a problem with compassion. Maybe you're like a super compassionate person. And maybe you are generous and you're charitable. Maybe you are honest and upright. Maybe you are a champion for justice and fair treatment. But now we get into the realm of personal stuff, the secret stuff that damages relationships, and I promise if you're sitting here, you're guilty of it. If you're standing here preaching, you're guilty of it. If you're in the band, you're guilty of it. If you're breathing, you're guilty of it. Do not spread slanderous gossip among your people. Does anybody here have a friend, like one single friend? Like, not a single friend, oh, you single ladies, but like a friend. Anybody? One? You got one? Okay. You've done this! Does anybody here have a sibling? Oh yeah, you've done it. Has anybody here ever been to the hairdresser? Mm-hmm. Anybody here ever been to a prayer meeting? Yeah? Yeah? Yeah. Uh-huh. Gossip happens every single day in every single home, and it starts really, really small, and it feels really, really, really good. It's therapeutic. We like to vent. I can't believe I did that, and I'm just venting about it. I'm just venting. I just got to say something about it because it feels good to do. I've been on both sides of this, and it's terribly destructive. It tears people down. It ruins relationships, and the problem is every single person does it. Verse 17 is similar. Do not nurse hatred in your heart for any of your relatives. Relatives meaning anyone in your faith community. Do not sit and nurture anger. Do not nurture anger. Don't nurse it. Don't let it sit at the dinner table with you. Ephesians 4:26 says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. We all like to be mad. Like you say you don't, but we do. We kind of like to be mad. I like it. I don't want to be angry, but when I am, like, their fault, and I'm just going to be mad, and I'm going to make them pay. Like, I'm not going to talk to them for a couple days. Maybe it's your wife. Like, I'm going to let her know. I'm going to let her know by not talking to her and giving her a dirty look when she looks at me, so you know. The problem is, when we do this, in the sight of God, you're just as wrong as she is, or you're just as wrong as he is. And there is this thing called righteous anger, but righteous anger relates to injustice against God. So I'm going to be righteously angry because of racism. I'm going to be righteously angry against the sex trade. You're being angry at your husband because he didn't make you dinner, or against your wife because you wanted to watch the game and she made you go to like a family reunion. That's not righteous anger, okay? Agreed? All right. And I'm going to be honest with you about me. I'm not sure I'm mature enough to understand when I have the right to be angry, okay? I've been a Christian a long time. My life is studying the Bible. I'm not sure if I'm mature enough to know when I have the right to be angry. So I'm just going to make it a practice to avoid it or deal with it right away when I get there. Don't nurse that anger. Don't hang on to it. Don't justify it. So what do? It says, confront people directly so you will not be held guilty for their sin. This is a tough one. Go to that person immediately, and this is why anger feels good, because we don't like to do this because it's terrible. It's no fun. Go to that person immediately and tell them about how they've sinned against you, because if you don't, God is going to hold you responsible for their sin. If you got a friend you come to church with, and they're stealing money from the collection basket, we don't got a ton, so please put it back. And you don't do your best to counsel them and go to them and confront them, you might as well be stealing the money too. Now imagine if they're doing something wrong and you know about it and you're going to other people about it and you're not telling them. You're responsible for their sin plus gossip, so what you're doing against them is worse than what you're angry at them for. Guilty. Guilty. That's why it's so hard to read this, because we're all guilty of it. But then the question comes, what if what they're doing, what if what I'm angry at them for is not really a sin, it's just kind of irritating? What do you do then? Let me tell you about this podium. Well, first I want to tell you about how much I love our band. You know that they played 2 songs that were theirs this morning, they made them themselves? That's pretty cool, right? Andrea came in to sort of she likes to pray with me and kiss me because she thinks I'm cute, and before I preach, and I'm like, their song they're playing is their song. And then I came over to them, that song, and I went to tell Bill, I'm like, that's their song. I'm so proud of those guys. Anyhow, this podium. It's got my name on it, right? Can you see it? Anybody, can you see that? It's got my name on it. It says Kyler. And it says XO, 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 XO. Hugs and kisses. In other words, I love you, but please don't touch my podium. This podium's like my security blanket. I could preach without it, but I like my blankie, okay? I got to have it. Every single week, someone else in the band's got my podium. And I'm frantically searching for it. I'm like, where's my podium? Where's it at? I blame Aaron John for this. I blame him. Blame him. But I tell him every week. In fact, this week I looked over there. He's singing. He's he's giving me the mode. I know we're gonna take care of it. Okay. He knows. Okay. So he knows where I stand about this stand. I did that on purpose. It's a little play on words. Now, I'm not mad about it. I think it's kind of funny, honestly. I think it's kind of enduring. It's sort of like a standing joke that we have. I don't even know if we should buy another one, just because it's fun, all right? I like a little adventure in my life. But if I was frustrated and I didn't tell him, do I have to? Do I have to tell him if I'm frustrated? It's just annoying me. It's not a sin. I don't really have to. What if I'm just a little frustrated? I got to make a choice. Either I just sort of decide not to be offended and think it's funny, or I'm going to have to let him know. Because if I can't make a decision not to be upset or get over it, I guess, what will happen is this minor irritation is going to start growing. And the wheels are going to start turning. And then I'm going to start keeping a record. And you know what? He always leaves these stupid cords out here for me to trip on. This thing right here is oftentimes in my back, like this, and I'm tripping on his stuff, and he does it on purpose. I'm sure, right? Look, I'm going to you as a friend. I got to vent a little. It's on purpose, right? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining my team. Why is his face always so close to that microphone? That's annoying. He spits on me sometimes. He does it on purpose. Aaron John's spitting on me. How can he do that? I've known that boy since he was 17. Taught him everything he knew except music. How can he do that to me? And the other day, before that, I wore a really stylish outfit to his wedding, and he made fun of my outfit. This is true. He obviously doesn't like me or care about me. He's a punk, which is evidenced by the podium. And then the other day, I was trying to tell him, I'm like, bro, I'm pretty much in the band because I'm up on stage with you guys all the time. And he goes, no, you're not on stage. You're on that short little black thing. Come on, man. This guy's got to go. He's got to go. You see what's happened? That one silly little thing has turned into an internal war that I'm fighting against him that he doesn't even know about. I haven't checked in. I haven't given him an opportunity to defend himself. I haven't given him an opportunity to tell me that maybe I'm sort of making a bigger deal out of it than I should. And now there's a fracture in our relationship. That's not good. Especially when I could have just gone to him or simply decided not to make that much of a deal out of it and just share my podium. Verse 17 leads into verse 18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. When you get upset, give grace. Don't keep a record of wrongs. When people ask for forgiveness, give it to them all the way. Don't keep little pieces of that in your pocket. I'm going to forgive you 90%, but save this little piece back here for the next time. I'm going to bring it up and let you know about it. Love your neighbor just like you want people to love you. Why? Because I am the Lord. And I want what's best for you. I want what's best for the community. So be fair with people. Be honest with people. Advocate for those people who need an advocate. Stand for justice. Love others in the way you want to be loved. And these principles were written 1,600 years before Jesus, but he summarizes them by saying the most important thing to him is that we love God and love our neighbors. This is what Jesus requires from the church. This is what Jesus requires from the church. Pay attention to that word, requires. Loving God and loving your neighbor is what Jesus requires from his church. And so I don't want you to leave here today thinking it's just something like this nice thing that we should do, that maybe like write down in a little notebook and think about doing sometimes. Loving your neighbor is the radical minimum standard for being a follower of Jesus Christ. The radical minimum standard. Not just some nice idea that we should strive for. It's the essential part of our calling and purpose. I think one mistake that we make in the church, especially in America, when we are the group of people who has the most religious freedom of any nation in the history of humanity. The richest group of people in the history of humanity. So we have religion that's free, and we have wealth. And we have this idea that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, that the purpose of forming a relationship with Jesus is just so we can go to heaven, then move to a cul-de-sac, go to church once every 6 weeks, and go see cheesy Christian movies. And then maybe put some offensive thing on Facebook about people who don't disagree with us. That's sort of the totality of Christianity in most of America. Now, heaven is a real thing. Eternity is a real thing, but that's not even the focal point of the gospel. God is a whole lot bigger than that. Our purpose is not American dream Christianity. The message of the gospel is that human beings are restored back to God for the purpose of restoring the world back to God. And the purpose of the church is to introduce the world to the kingdom of God. What did Jesus talk most about in his earthly ministry? The kingdom of God. Descending, coming to earth through us. Our Father in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So Jesus' purpose was to bring restoration, to bridge the gap between human beings and God, to restore dignity to suffering people and bring light to the dark places of the world. And so wrap your mind around this piece. Listen, if you forget everything else, remember this. We are his chosen vessels through or which he's chosen to reveal himself to the world. He has chosen the church. Jesus has chosen us to reveal himself to the world. Now the world, you don't have to be a religious person. The world knows that there is a hatred problem. The world knows that there's a poverty problem. The world knows that there's a racism problem. And the world looks at God and says, God, where are you? But God points back down to us, the church, and he says, that's where they are. My kingdom come. My will be done on earth as it is in heaven through them. So all these grand things are assigned to me and to you and to you and to you and to you. All these grand things are assigned to us. We will be the ones that show people who Jesus is in the way we advocate for hopeless people, the way we advocate for marginalized people. Maybe people that you'll never see in this building. They'll never see you here. You'll never know their name. They'll just know that there was something about you that was different, and they'll see Christ on you. We are here to build a community of empowerment. We are the ones who will teach the world about radical generosity. We are the ones who will reveal peace and grace. And what I want is us to start right here, church. And let's start by the way that we treat one another. Let's be a model of grace and peace. Let's start here with the person sitting next to you, the person you're going home with, and your friendships, and the people with work, and the way that we treat the people that aren't the same as us. Let's bring heaven to earth and proclaim the name of Jesus Christ with our hands and our feet and our hearts. Stand up, church, and through the presence of Christ, create a movement of love and compassion and power in Jesus' name. We will be a community. We will be a church. We will be a people that loves our neighbors well. Let's worship together.
The mountains shake before you, the demons running